Welcome to the ONSTAGE Podcast, where we interview musicians and members of the entertainment community.
I can do the oh Canada, dun 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 dun.
Well, I was looking forward to this ever since I had the Sisters J on the podcast, and they
Mhm.
mentioned you, and I'm like, "You're kidding, him?" you know. And I find out that you worked with Whitney Houston and Bob Dylan and Diana Ross, and I'm like, "Oh my God, bring this guy on, please!" So here we are. I
Yeah.
love it. I'm really happy.
Continuing on, too, I was just in L.A. with these three women that I'm a musical director of, with Shirley Bassey, Dionne Warwick, and Frida Payne, which is pretty exciting. So if they manage to get all of that put together, it'll be an amazing show.
Yeah. There's some duets that I believe shouldn't belong, like Elton John and Britney Spears. I mean, what about how, like, really? And I'm gonna be honest with you, Ted, I didn't, and everyone's gonna hate me for this, and I don't like the David Bowie and the Bing Crosby, little drummer boy. I never liked it, but hey, anybody who sings with Bing Crosby or David Bowie was pretty lucky. Put them two together, it's what can I say?
Yep.
But
Yeah, I like duets with people who you wouldn't expect
yeah,
to put a duet. I mean, there's Dolly Parton has a record out with duets with everybody on there, and it's like I don't know about that one, but a cousin of mine put together Frank Sinatra with Bono and all these different people years ago, and that was kind of cool. Everybody liked that. I mean, Frank is amazing, was amazing.
yeah,
I didn't get a chance to work with him, but I worked with his son Frank Sinatra Jr. and he was great. All the
that's
same
awesome.
music, which was cool to get to work with that stuff.
That's awesome. Everyone, you would not believe who we have. We have Ted Theo Perlman, producer, and he is an American musician, record producer, songwriter, and arranger. He has produced, arranged, recorded, and toured with major artists including Whitney Houston, Harry Belafonte, Bob Dylan, Diana Ross, Burt Bacharach, Ronald Isley, the whole list of them here. But everyone,
Put my Canadians,
you're
put the
gonna be
Canadians in.
You're going to be amazed to know that he worked with Ringo Starr, just so you know. But I'm really looking forward to speaking to him because he wrote clearly for the Sisters J. And that episode is up on the podcast. You can watch that first. And so Ted has been around for a while. Ted,
Yes.
could you please give us a little bit of background for everyone who does not know who Ted Perlman is, and give us a little bit of background of growing up, where you grew up, and why you chose music and producing. And
Well, so I am from New York originally. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and lived in the tri-state area, which are New York, Long Island, Connecticut, upstate, that whole area they call the tri-state, and they're very arrogant there. They don't even call New York City New York. They just call it the city, as if there's no other city in the world that's like New York. Okay, fine, just the city. You live in the city, and so I grew up there. I lived overseas after I graduated school. I lived in Israel for a couple of years, and then when I got back to New York, I toured with a couple of different groups. The Crystals, the Run Run Run, Phil Spector's Crystals. I was the musical director for that, and then I got the job with Harry Belafonte, where for all my Canadian friends, Harry would tour all over Canada. O'Keefe for 2 weeks in Toronto, Hamilton Place. We played every Winnipeg, Centennial Hall, Regina, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, cold, Vancouver, and he would stay in these places not just a day like what some people do. We'd stay there a week, 2 weeks. I said so. I have a lot of friends in Toronto, and I used to Salome Bay at the Underground. We used to go by there, and so
mhm.
it was great. Have musicians and at studios. George Simcoe, a friend of mine. So it was great to be there, and it said all the way to Halifax. And so anyway, after Harry, I got back. I started staying in New York, and I worked with did a lot of recording and worked with people like you mentioned, Whitney Houston, Bob Dylan, da 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 da. And in '86, moved out to California and lived in California for a lot of years. Started, producing a lot more stuff out there, and that's where I spent like 15 years with Burt Bacharach, which was great. I got to work with Brian Wilson and Elvis Costello and Sir Tim Rice, and just 1,000 different names. I had everybody you can think of. I had in my studio, and just to see Billy Preston coming in the studio and just have these amazing musicians, and the list is like huge of the people I got to work with. But the people I always say, people say you should write a book, and the book would be more about my faith journey and how I got closer to my faith and how these people affected that. And not, I have, the Jackson family, the this, the that. I have lots of names, but what's important is how I looked at their life and what I learned from them. And I had some people that were outside of music, even like a person I did like 50 songs with, a lady named Elizabeth Keck, and the Keck Foundation paid for the Hubble telescope, the Rift Observatory in Los Angeles, that they Keck hospitals. So here's a lady who was in that upper echelon of money that I had never met anybody like. I mean, with all Burt Bacharach, with I worked with Elton John, all these people, they had money, but she had that other money that was, in that other level. Nixon used to work for her when he came out of the White House, and she won the Kentucky Derby with her cars. Her horse was a Ferdinand with her jockey Willie Shoemaker. I mean, I'd never been around anybody who's from that Rockefeller, Kennedy kind of clique. So she was really interesting. We did a lot of songs, and just to see how she looked at the world, she just really had a good sense of everything. And so, anyway, after living in LA, my marriage broke up and I got on my own. And then I went to seminary for 5 years while I was still producing. And then I met my amazing wife in 2019. We got married and we live in Nashville now, which is a condensed version of my entire career. But I've been blessed to work with people I'm working with people now from China. A lot of things I can do online. I was in China 3 times. So I work with people in China. I've been to Japan. I've been to South America with famous Latino artists like Willie Colon. I even had a guitar given to me by Fidel Castro. And
Really?
I've toured all over the world. I've been to all through Europe and England, France. I've played for Princess Grace in Monaco.
Wow.
Just as much traveling down, as much as I could. It gave me a really good sense of different kinds of music, and I've done African music. So I have all this music in my head from people who are here, people aren't here anymore, and
Mm.
I just carry all that, and I'm able to work when I work with young people from here in Nashville, like Sisters J. I can bring such a wide variety of music. I mean, I've conducted orchestras, I've written horns and strings, and done music from Broadway to theater. I have a classical #1 record. I mean, just the widest variety, kind of eclectic, but it's really given me a good worldview of music as opposed to just a narrow, wherever I'm living at the moment kind of thing.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And you extensively traveled, and because Hamilton and Toronto, like 30 minutes either way. And I was at
Hmm.
the Hamilton place, and I'm familiar with it. But yeah, Edmonton is pretty cold. So I was mentioning earlier about David Bowie and Elton John. I don't know, did you ever work with David Bowie?
My friend Carlos Alomora was David's musical director for 30 years. Him and his wife, Robin Clark, friends of mine from all the way back to New York. My friend Amir, who when I played for Stephanie Mills back in 1980, a long
Wow.
time ago. But Amir, the bass player, had played on Fame, and so it was pretty cool. He had such great stories. I have all these stories, but some of them, like Amir said, when they were in the studio, they were jamming on Knock on Wood, the old Eddie Floyd song, I Don't Want to Lose.
Yeah.
And they were just jamming on that. And John Lennon came in, and John Lennon had like some lyrics written down. And so he just thought that the funniest thing was that it wasn't a attache case with nice lyrics written in, on typed paper, you know, and a manila envelope. He said he took a piece of paper out of his pocket and did like this to smooth it out, and that was like words he was working on, and they just jammed for a couple of hours in the studio, and then he never heard what it sounded like. They went back to England and they put it together, and then when he heard Fame, he was like, wow, that's pretty cool. He did it kind of like the Rolling Stones, David Bowie. Some of those people just record, and then they put it together afterwards. It's kind of like a you don't know what's going on. I worked with Bob Dylan. I recorded 2 albums with Bob, and one of the sessions we did in New York was very, was organized, organized. And then one of the ones in California, Sam Shepard was in the control room. It was me and Stevie's drummer, Raymond Pounds, James Jamerson Jr., and just everybody kind of, me and Al Cooper playing, and just kind of like, nobody knew what was going on, like that. That just kind of like Bob would start, yeah, I don't know if I don't know if you'll hear this. I don't know if this is going to come through or not, but is this on? Can you hear that?
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I
So
love it.
Bob would just play. Yeah, so 1956.
Oh,
Telecaster.
nice.
But Bob would play like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plays like that, and even Bob was great. Like I would tune the guitar.
Bob Dylan. Yeah, I don't know how he got away with singing with that voice.
He could sing. I have a record I did of singing by George Gershwin that I recorded with him, and it sounds really good. It was like, wow, he showed up and he said, I have to do this thing in New York, and I need a George Gershwin song.
Yeah, your
And
voice is getting drowned out by the sound of guitar. Is there any way you can have like a
sorry,
microphone or
here's
something
my
there?
folks. I'm on a $1,000 mic right here, but the guitar was in there. Sorry.
Oh
So
yeah, maybe
anyway,
it's not on or working, but yeah,
yeah,
like I said,
this is
that's.
but
What did you say? Like I couldn't hear the name of the guitar that you have. Was that a Fel?
it's made by a man, Jim Ditloff, up near Canada,
Oh,
Minnesota.
okay.
And
So it's
it's
not a
Glory, but it's a
not a
1956 Telecaster, but he
Telecaster.
recreates them, and so this is my best guitar I ever had. But
Wow.
I was saying about Bob. The funny thing is that when he was in my studio back in Studio City, I did work with him in the studio and then in my own private studio, and so I would tune the guitar, and then he'd get it and he'd play it, and I say, "Give it to me again," and I check it, it was right, and so he would push the strings like that.
Awesome.
So that
I love it.
it worked for him, no problem. So he's a great artist, great singer, and I've had some really great experiences with him over the years. Which is he came to my house in New York right after they recorded "We Are the World,"
Hmm.
and he said, I just made the record, gonna be a big hit," and I was laughing. It's like this is 1988, I think, or something. And I said, 80, no, actually, it was probably earlier, 84. And so I said, you haven't had a big hit in a long time. What are you talking about? And he said, no, it's going to be a big hit. Got Stevie Wonder, got Bruce Springsteen, got everybody. Actually, Harry Belafonte came up with the idea for We Are the World. And if you see the video, Harry's in the back, and there's actually a video of Al Jarreau leading everybody singing Deo, along, with Harry, and Harry's really embarrassed. But Bob came in and told us about it, and you know, 2 weeks or 3 weeks after that, suddenly it was like everywhere, and that became one of the biggest records ever. But Bob had not had a top 40 record in 1984 or five in years. So it was just funny to think back on it. It's gonna be a big hit. You're like, yeah, right. And so, yep, egg in my face.
So what do you think of his son Jacob Dylan from the Wallflowers? Do you think he has a good voice?
Yeah, I love them. They're really cool. There's two. The Wallflowers are great. I only met Jacob once when he came by in a car.
Mm,
Bob was leaving, and we talked to him. And then I used to work with Albert Hammond,
mm.
and Albert's son, Albert Hammond Jr., who actually was in my studio. I did 3 songs for him. He's in a group called The Strokes, and so it was really cool how the next generation after these really famous, like Ringo Starr's kid Zach Starkey plays John Bonham's kid,
Oh
Jason
wow.
Bonham, was playing. They're all, these guys just, some of their kids are really talented and
Wow.
really, really good. So that's pretty. I always tell people that I'm the king of working with people's kids or brothers or sisters. Like I said, I wanted to work with Frank Sinatra. I worked with Frank Sinatra Jr. I wanted to work with Barbara Streisand. I worked with his sister Roz Kine. I wanted to work with Paul McCartney. I worked with Ringo. I wanted to work with Keith Richards. I worked with Ron Wood. I wanted to work with Tina Turner. I worked with Ike Turner. And I worked with children of famous people, brothers and sisters. So I've learned from all of them, but it wasn't the one that I dreamed about working. So I just stopped thinking about who I wanted to work with and let it flow because I don't seem to be able to have any control over that. It seems to be God has set me people that He feels that I should be working with, not the ones that I wanted to.
Wow.
Dave Mason. I wanted to work with Stevie Winwood. I did 2 albums with Dave Mason. I was
Huh.
like, okay,
Nice.
fine. Dave's an amazing songwriter, musician, singer. So I stopped making a wish list of people that I want. Like I said, the reason I got to work with Dave Mason, this lady was in my studio. She said, "You've worked with everybody. Haven't you worked with that you want to work with?" So she said, "Write down 5 people." So I write down 5 people that I want to work with, and Dave Mason is number 5. She said, "Oh, I know Dave." Click, click, click. Get on the phone. "Hello, Dave." And she said, "Great. Go to Dave's house tomorrow. You're gonna, go over there
Amazing.
and meet Dave." I was like, wow, okay, cool. I mean, even I work with Margaret Atwood, who's a famous Canadian
Yeah. Wow.
songwriter and author, not just songwriter. And me and Orville Stover, we did the music for her book, Year of the Flood,
Amazing.
and she wrote the poems, and Orville wrote the music for it, and I produced it, and it was, she was great. She's Joni Mitchell. I've been to Joni's house, worked with Joni. So on my list of famous Canadians is like David Foster, Joni Mitchell, Margaret Atwood.
Gordon Lightfoot.
These are just. I didn't get to meet Gordon. No,
Yes.
Dan. What's his name?
I
Sometimes
had
when
her.
we touch.
I had his daughter, Meredith Moon, on my podcast, and we
Wow.
and
Okay.
she didn't want me to talk about her father, but I did, and it was a wonderful conversation. So I was just
Wow.
happy to talk to her. Um, Sorry to interrupt. In lines of that, I know one relative or sibling, whatever that famous sibling. You probably didn't. Sherilyn Sarkisian Lapierre. Did you ever do anything with her sister, or maybe Chastity? Sorry, not Chastity. Chad or Elijah.
No, if you want to do French, though, I had Roch Voisine in my studio, and Roch Voisine is this
Wow, I like him.
Canadian hockey player who was like a singer, and he came out to LA, and I didn't know who he was. He was in my studio. We were working on a song, and
Yeah,
then somebody who lived in Paris came in like 2 weeks later, and she said, "Who are you working with?" I said, "I don't know. I had this hockey player in here named Roch Voisine." And she said, "Oh my God, she like barely, she like fainted,
I
just
like
like
Rock. He's good.
it was cool. It was like great, okay, he was very nice and stuff, and they just they wanted to make him into kind of like a Harry Styles kind of
Hmm.
solo singer, but he was, sometimes people work there in one area and they can never. Robbie, what's his name from England? Robbie something. They've been trying to make him famous in the States and it never worked. But in England, he's huge. There was a couple of singers from Australia. I've been to Australia, and I can't remember his name though, but he was huge in Australia and America, nothing. Even a group came into my studio. Dick Clark
Mm.
sent them to me. They were called Nana, and they were Russian. It's a Russian boy band. They played to hundreds and thousands of people in Russia. They had to
Wow.
get security going, but so they came to LA. Nobody knew them. Nobody knew anything about them. I took them down to a church with Dr. Robert Schuller that they broadcast that on TV every week. I took them down there, but other than that, they were on the American Music Awards and they were in the audience and they mentioned them, but nothing. Back to Russia. Back in Russia, they were, huge. So, kind of like I work with a Canadian singer from Edmonton named Shimmer Johnson, and she's been nominated for Juno Awards and that kind of stuff. But in the States, nobody knows who she is here.
Um,
It's just,
well, you said you went to Israel. Now we have ties, family ties, to Israel, so we can
oh,
figure that.
really?
And
Okay, that's fine.
I
Okay.
Really
Oh,
love. They live in Haifa.
oh yeah, Haifa up north in Lebanon, sure.
So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I said I lived there for over the course of 2 years. I mean, I did records with Shimon Peres.
Yes. Like we mentioned about Israel, I do, and I guess I'll have to use my. I don't know. I'll try. But yes, yeah. I was going to tell you, I fell in love with this Israeli musician by the name of Joshua Aaron. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I
Really
never
good
met him.
musician.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he's great. But he too
yeah, he
is a Jewish Christian as well.
yeah he you call it a Jewish believer.
Yeah.
I say, I have a tattoo on my arm of Jesus' name in Hebrew, Yeshua. But some people say, "Did you convert?" Didn't convert. There's nothing to convert. I just, you follow Jesus, who came for the Jews. If you want to get,
And when I
you
find
want to know
out
why
that
I'm.
when I found out that you were a theologian with 45 plus years experience working at the highest levels, yeah, a theologian, I was actually very excited on that because that's something I want to end up doing is studying the Bible and learning Hebrew. I want to learn
Mhm,
Hebrew and Greek and learn the Bible.
mhm.
I don't know if you heard of Dr. Michael Heiser, but he's my favorite apologist.
Okay.
And he tells you to, when you read the Bible, always read it with first century eyes. And ever since I've been doing that, things just change for me.
Yep, yep. I said, that's my source, and it's funny because born Jewish, but I never, really participated. Even when I lived in Israel, we didn't go to synagogue. We just did music. And so I didn't know anybody who went to synagogue. We were just living in Israel and Jewish, and that was it. Nothing religious about it. And so when I went to seminary, then I became proud that was Jewish. My Jewish, I became proud of it. I learned more Hebrew in seminary than I knew living in Israel.
Wow.
And so it was cool. Then I said, meeting my wife, who's much better at Greek, she got her degree there. She's a chaplain, and it was just great to, like you said, study the Bible, and it's been a continuing, mission of mine to keep studying and how does that relate to music, and it kind of put my life in more of a orderly form where priorities were God instead of music. I thought music was God,
What did you
so it
th-
just changed.
what did you think of Israel? Like, did you go to Bethlehem and do the tour? Did you go to see
I
the?
was no,
Oh no.
I was there in the I was there in the 70s, and
Oh.
in the 70s, there were places I couldn't even go to Egypt.
Mm.
So you couldn't go across the border or anything like that. I just wanted to see the pyramids, and we couldn't go there. It was very low key when I was there. I first got to kibbutz, and I started on kibbutz, and I met the daughter of the most famous Israeli singer at that time, named Yafa Yarkoni. So he took me to meet her mother, and I played for her mother, and the mother gave me a job at a club in Jaffa, Chamera. So I was off the kibbutz, and I was working. I went back to working, and then when I went back the second time, I really went to working a lot and lots of recording sessions and playing with different artists, and so it was very low key. It was very like didn't matter who anybody was, and I see pictures of Israel now, and it looks like New York City. I mean, just I lived a half a block from the beach, and it
Mm.
was like I could walk to the beach, go to the beach, run, get around Tel Aviv. Now it looks like very uh, urban, urban, urban. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. It doesn't look anything like what I remembered, which was, now Israel now would be the relationship of Israel to the Israel I remembered is kind of like looking at I don't know what Winnipeg looks like now either, but like a small city in Canada compared to Toronto, like or Montreal or something like that. It's
Wow,
just
amazing, my friend. This guy knows everyone. You can't mention one artist without saying I worked with him. Um,
yeah. It's at seminary. The president called me the Forrest Gump of music because I literally could connect myself to anybody. Like normally like one, oh yeah, I met them, I've worked with them, I have some kind of connection to them. it's just been a amazing, um, wonderful life. But after I found the Lord, it put everything into making sense because I just didn't understand how all these pieces fit together. It just seemed like God had me on a journey that was didn't make sense to me at the time.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about any political stuff, but what's happening now in Israel is really terrible. Apart from that, I feel it. But who was the most difficult to work with?
um, okay, so I was with Harry Belafonte for 3 years. I was really young when I started, about 21, 22, and he was the first major star back, especially back then. I started in 1976, and that was the job. If you were a musician, you wanted to get that job. You had to be really a great player, and he was so tough on me, like a Marine Sergeant Army. I don't know if you know the Marines in Canada, but he did not give me any leeway. He was just push me to wouldn't let me play anything I knew. I had to play classical guitar. I replaced a guy named Savuka, this Brazilian albino guitarist who was amazing. I was like, I don't do that, and I ended up playing these solo pieces with just guitar and his vocal. I played African guitar, so I learned so much stuff that was outside my comfort zone. And he, until the third year, he was like he just pushed me harder than anybody had ever done. And so he wasn't difficult I mean, he was, he had his eccentricities and things like that. But he really saw something in me that I didn't even see, and outside, I just wanted to do pop and R&B and rock. And he didn't let me play any of that stuff. He was like, "You're going to play African guitar." It's like, I don't know anything about African guitar. Well, leave some recordings, listen to it, and figure it out. And then he heard me in the dressing room up in Canada one time, and I was playing. I had a little harmonica I carried, a little blues harmonica. And next day they bring me a chart, and here's your harmonica part. I was like, "What do you mean my harmonica part? Go to the store, buy every harmonica in every key, and here's the part you're going to play on a harmonica." But I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm going to play harmonica on this Ralph McTell's on the streets of London, and just all these things. I said nylon string guitar, which I hadn't played much before. So all things that I didn't know about. I said outside my comfort zone. He just explained. Harry was just so innovative with that. Like he was dyslexic, so he would, people would see things backwards. So that same thing he brought to music, and he saw my wah wah pedal, which normally is like, the classic wah 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 or shaft or that kind of Jimi Hendrix wah 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 Eric Clapton. He said, "What happens if you turn it around?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Nobody turns around the wah wah pedal that's just there on the floor and you go wah 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 and that's it." He said, "Turn it around." I was like, "Okay, fine." He's my boss. I have to do what he asked me to do. So I turn it around, and instead of going wah, it goes meow meow. He's like, "Yeah, I like that. It sounds like African." And
Wow.
it was cool. It was great. Nobody but somebody who saw the world in a different light would think of something like that. And like I said, his "We Are the World" was his idea.
Mm.
Harry came up with that, called Ken Cragen, and then called Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, but that
Wow.
was his idea to do something for hunger in Africa. So he's, Martin Luther King and all the civil rights marches, and Harry was like, really, he used his platform, kind of like a Margaret Atwood, who uses her platform to try to influence things in our culture, like Bono,
Hmm.
who uses his platform. And those are the people you have to admire instead of somebody who just uses their money to buy cars and jewelry. Somebody who really says, I like Muhammad Ali, I have a platform. What can I use this for to, help people? Those are my heroes.
Wow. Um, that wah-wah pedal is amazing. You just never know. For instance, I've asked a country singer. In country music, you get that sort of like that country kind of guitar sound. That's from like a guitar, but like um, you can tell it's country by the.
Hawaii. It's Hawaii. Because I said I work with Daniel Ho. He's a great mandolin player. That kind of sound, but it's
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
but
Yeah.
Hawaiian music.
Oh, you're playing Looney Tunes there for a minute.
Yeah, that's right. They use that for so country. So taking things that came out of one style, gospel music became rock. So gospel music would be like right. That's country music, and you take country music, Elvis, and you just put a different beat to it, and it's like then you get rock and roll. It's gospel, which is different lyrics.
Well, if you said,
You know,
can you do the Dukes of Hazzard theme song? I'd be interested in hearing that one.
I don't know. Dukes of Hazzard.
They're the good old boys. I was about
Yeah.
to sing that one. They're the good old boy. Do 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 do. Yeah. Um. So you mentioned about "We Are the World." That was his idea. Like you mentioned,
Yes.
I think you said Harry Belafonte. Um, who was responsible for the "Do They Know It's Christmas" Band Aid one?
Oh, that's over in England. That was George Michael and some of the people from Duran Duran wrote that.
Okay.
I only knew I knew Helena, one of the singers that I saw in the video. We were all like, "Oh, that's Helena. What's she doing over there?" But she happened to be in England at the time. The "We Are the World" one I said was
Hmm.
written by Lionel, Michael Jackson, and I think Harry called Quincy too. But when he made his phone calls, he was just very motivated to do things when he'd see something on the TV. He helped get Nelson Mandela out of prison, down in South
Wow.
Africa. He
Incredible.
did a lot of stuff that people didn't know about. And just, all I said, the civil rights movement, he's the one that brought all the Hollywood stars down to Alabama. He really put his money where his mouth is. He was very, very left. We disagreed on a lot of political things, but he really, I said, put his money into causes that he believed in that would help people. So you have to admire him for that.
Well, I'm going to ask this, but there's a Ronald Perlman, an actor. Are you related to him, or is it totally different?
Yeah, like this is Rhea Perlman from Cheers. There's Ron Perlman from Beauty and the Beast, and Sons of Anarchy TV. He works a lot, and also yeah, he was what's the one Hellboy. He
Hmm.
was in that. Yeah, I met him in the bank one time, and I said we're cousins somewhere because we both spell our last name P-E-R. Sometimes people misspell it as P-E-A,
Mm.
but we're P-E-R. Also, Yitzhak Perlman, the violin player.
Yep.
There's a few of us Perlmans around, and the same man with the same name as me, Theodore Perlman, which is my full name. He was one of the founders of McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
So
Um,
that because if you look at the name up, sometimes he'll show up on there too.
that's amazing. Um, there was something I wanted to ask you about the Sisters J, but um, I wanted. I'm. I don't want to say I'm desperate, but I really want to know that Joe Cocker. Like, why did he sing like this? Is there a reason, or is that just his style, or was like I'm kind of interested in.
That's a funny story because I played in a group in New York called Stuff, and this is like the greatest R&B musicians that were in New York: Richard T, me, Eric Gale, Cornell Dupree, Steve Gadd, Chris Parker, Gordon Edwards, and so for me this was, pardon the expression, white boy heaven because growing up and just wanting to always play that music to get to be in that band was great. So that's where I got to work with Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker played with that band. He took them on tour before I got there. And so the first time I played on stage with Joe at the Bitter End back in New York, uh, I was standing there and I look at him to my left, and he goes into that thing, and I could not keep a straight face, and I had to like look over here because it was like if it was John Belushi, I would have just been laughing because John Belushi could imitate Joe Cocker, but this was Joe Cocker, and it's like he's standing right next to me. He's doing his Joe Cocker thing, and it just struck me as being so funny, you know. And so I tried not to laugh and kept playing. Years later, I was backstage with him at the Greek Theater in L.A., and I'd never gotten a picture. There's so many people I don't have pictures with because we didn't have cell phone cameras back then. So I said to him, "I want to get a picture now." He says, "Who are you?" I said, "I played with you." He says, "I don't remember anybody that played with me back then." He said, "I don't remember anything about then." And I was like, "There's a
That's
picture of me
Joe.
with him." And I'm saying under my breath, "Just shut up and take the picture." And he's smiling and I'm smiling, but I'm saying to him, "Just shut up." He says, "I don't remember anybody from back then. I was drunk so much." And I was like, "Okay, fine. Just remember this moment." So I'm glad I got to get a picture. Just, some that said we didn't have cameras all the time. So I'm missing so many pictures of people that are gone. I had a picture with Billy Preston when he was in my studio. Sarita
Wow.
Wright brought it. Stevie Wonder's ex-wife, Sarita. They had a big duet with You on Born Again with Billy, and Billy played with the Beatles and that. And so I had a picture with Billy, and the photo lab screwed up the film, and they said, "Sorry, we messed up the film, but here's a couple of blank film." I was like, and at this point, Billy had passed away. I said, "I don't want blank film. I can't get that. It wasn't a digital camera; it was just film. I can't get that film back." That's just so it's in. There's pictures in my head that don't exist. When I was in the studio with Bob Dylan in New York, there's
Wow.
one moment where he was in the corner, and there's a light on his head, that curly hair, and he's got the guitar and on his knee is up, and he's writing something. He's got a pad, he's writing. There's the guitar, there's the light, and I got from behind. And one day I'm going to have somebody like a police artist. I'm going to tell them exactly what I saw and let them make that picture because that's the way I like to remember Bob. That was just an amazing picture. It'll be a
Wow.
great picture. I mean, I can recant, is that the word? Recant. I can recant exactly the image as it
Wow.
was right there. So just one of those moments,
Is
like
it?
like seeing you. I'll remember you. Your cool hat.
Yeah. I'll be playing Thunderstruck with you. Smoke on the water.
Yeah. Okay. No. ACDC. We're gonna get. Wait, no, but I love ACD.
Wow, man.
I love
Can you
ACDC.
build Heroes by David Bowie? The orchestral part of it. Start me up, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Start me up. I love, yeah, Rolling Stones. Some
All,
of.
the, all those all those songs have such great riffs, and you
Can't
hear
believe
them.
he's still going
You
on at 80. He's still dancing on the stage like he was a 25-year-old, but he's 80 years old. One day he's gonna break his back and say, "Oh, well, you're 80 years old. No wonder."
No, you can't kill Keith Richards. Keith Richards is he has vampire blood or something like that.
Yeah,
Keith Richards is he's like immortal. He'll be like
yeah,
360 years old. I mean, he looks like he died 30 years ago already, but he's just keeps going like
yeah.
he ever
Keep
is.
on going. You can. Yep. I've heard of 95, 100-year-old magicians, musicians, and they're still playing.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, how did you find the Sisters J, and were they familiar with who you were?
They were recommended by a man named Thornton Klein. They're actually on Clientele Records. That's his label, and he lives right near them up in Hendersonville, which is a little bit outside Nashville, kind of like Hamilton to Toronto. I think might be just about that kind of an area. And he recommended to their mother that you should be working with Ted. So I met with them. I mean, it was like going on 6 months, and I'd almost given up, and then we started working together. And they really special. I mean, the family, the father, their younger brother. I mean, they become really close to me and my wife, and they're so good. Both those girls are really they're talented. They know a lot of different music, and they can sing Julie Andrews, theatrical things like
Yeah,
that. And I'm always hollering at them to
it was a
sing
great interview.
harder.
It was a great interview we had with them. It was awesome.
They're so beautiful. They just sing so beautifully. and they can just sing anything by themselves. And I'm always like, sing harder, sing like David Bowie. Angela Bowie was in my studio. I said related to David, but I didn't work with David. So
Wow.
Angela came in, and Angela said that David would make her smoke 2 packs of cigarettes before she recorded because he wanted her voice to be raspy. So I told the sisters, Jay, we have a choice here. We can either sing louder or we can go out and start smoking cigarettes. And Mother's like, no, 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 I don't want them smoking cigarettes.
How
I
about
wanted them to
That's
edgier.
funny. How about Dweezil Zappa or Moon Unit Zappa or Frank Zappa himself? Did you ever work with them?
No, I wasn't a Frank Zappa fan at all. I mean, I admire his beliefs about a lot of things, but as far as his music, it just I always try every couple of years. I pull out a Frank Zappa playlist from Apple Music, and I put it on, and I can never get more than 2 songs in, and I'm like, ay ay ay. But I like the stuff that Flo and Eddie did with them at the I think it was recorded at the Fillmore, Peaches and Regalia, and that kind of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, I know musicians have worked with Frank, and they just uh, loved Frank because it was really complicated.
Hmm.
And I just am a fan of music that everybody can recognize and enjoy, no matter what style. It's country, pop, rock, jazz, dance, anything. And Frank was just like a niche kind of thing that just. I mean, I respect him, but it wasn't something I wanted to hear over and over again.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. What's your most What's your most memorable experience with an artist that made you go, I want to work with him again, or that was absolute heaven, or wow, she's fantastic. What's her number?
Uh,
You know.
Okay, so it is about three or four. Um, Whitney Houston,
Mm.
first time I heard her sing and played with her, I was like, wow, this little 18, 19-year-old girl really has that special thing in her voice. The same thing when I was on stage for the first time with Stephanie Mills, and I only knew she'd done The Wiz, but when I got on stage with her, it was like her power just went boom into me, and I could hardly play. It just was so. She had that. I mean, she's still singing. Whitney's, Stephanie's still around. Great singer. When I was in the studio with Bob Dylan, one of the first records I did with him, didn't even bring my guitar. I was just, hanging out at Power Station, and he said, "Hey, did you get a guitar?" And it was like, okay, well, he let me actually the '56 Telly. This ties into that story. So he lent me his '56 Telly, and
Wow.
Mark Knopfler had played the guitar on this song called "Tight Connection in My Heart."
Dire
And
Straits.
so
Amazing.
yeah, he said, erase Mark. I'm gonna put call me Pearly. I'm gonna put Pearly on. And I was there like, I love Mark Knopfler. He's a great guitar player. My friend Jack Riveri played in Dire Straits with Mark. He said, well, we're going to erase that. And this is back before computers. This is like tape. So it's like, once it's gone, it's gone. I said to Bob, what if you don't like what I played? And he turns around and goes, well, you better play something I like. And so I just played the first thing that came into my head. And the 2 solos on Tight Connection My Heart from Empire Burlesque are me. Mick Taylor's playing a rhythm part, but those are all my guitar parts. And so that was pretty exciting to, first of all, to live up to Mark, who's one of my guitar heroes, and then for it to end up there at the end, that was pretty cool.
Wow.
And then some of the things, playing in different churches with people. There's a singer named Esther Marrow who was a protege of Mahalia Jackson, and she, I did gigs with her where I was sitting on my amp, and I don't think my rear end touched the amp for more than a second because I was like this, And in church, there was a church in LA called First AME Church, First African Methodist Episcopal Church, and I played down there, and the pastor at one point, Reverend Chip Murray, very famous pastor in that Baptist church, he turned around, he looked at me, and he says, "Ted Perlman, play something on that guitar." So I go ring like that, and he goes, "It's in the middle of his sermon. He's talking Colossians or where he is, Ephesians," and he just stops and goes into this. And I said, "Bang!" And he says, "Bang!" And he starts singing back what I played, And then so he said, play something else. So and he sings it back. And I said, this is not usual thing that happens in the middle of a sermon with a full church there.
Wow.
And then I said, well, I probably should, move on. I don't want anybody to get mad at me. So I kicked into, and the drummer came in, and we just tore it up for 5 minutes. It was like a scene from the Blues Brothers where Belushi's going up and down the aisle, and people are jumping up, and it was that was a really amazing moment just to be part of that, and
Wow.
not just on the outside, but to be part of what was going on actually. Yeah, that was those kind of moments are really special that keep and remember, where you just feel like you just witnessed something that was magical.
You know who was also studying under Mahalia Jackson? Are you
Who?
familiar with Della Reese from Touched by an Angel?
Oh yeah, I knew Della. I used to
Oh,
go to
okay.
her
Yeah.
church in L.A.
Yeah.
Yeah, Della's great.
Yeah. Yeah. She brought up Mahalia Jackson all the time. Um,
Sure.
it's amazing. It's amazing how we're all connected. You hear that who knows who. And I was actually
Hmm.
going to have Drew Lawrence, he's an artist, and he
Hmm.
wrote the Christina Perry song Jar of Hearts. So I wanted to ask him how that came to be, but I haven't heard from him. But
Hmm.
it would be kind of interesting. I
Sure.
always like to have songwriters on. And what's
Hmm.
what's the most memorable song that you've written that you still play today?
I'm going to do it. There's a radio station here, Nashville Free Radio. I'm going on February 9th, I think. And there's a song I wrote called um, Lover's Lullaby. And
Mm,
it was on an album. I produced an album on a group called the Manhattans,
mm.
which they had two really big hits. Honey, you are my shining star. And then the other one I love, which is Let's Just Kiss and Say Goodbye. And the opening of it has that great speech where Blue Lovett, the bass singer, goes, "This has got to be the saddest day of my life." And they're all going, la, 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 la. And then at the end of that, he goes, "Let's just kiss and say goodbye." Da, 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 da. And it goes into the song there. And so I used to call Blue Lovett up when I had Lee Loughnane from Chicago, the trumpet player from the group Chicago, was in. And I ended up bringing Chicago horns in on one of the songs I produced on the Manhattans. I had Billy Preston playing organ, Chicago horns. But I would call up Blue Lovett back in Arizona
Yeah.
where he lived, and I'd say, "Hey, do the speech." And he'd be like, "What? It's 10 o'clock at night." I said, "Come on, man, do the speech." He said, "Man," he called me like all kind of like names. And finally, after I annoyed him enough, he'd be like, "Okay, fine. This has got to be the saddest day of my life." And I don't care. Phil Everly could have been in my studio, anybody. And I'd be like, "Watch this. You want to hear everybody love the Manhattan, so let's call up Blue Lovett."
Well,
I said,
yeah.
"Come on, man." I made him do that speech for everybody, no matter 1 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night, 3 in the afternoon. If I was working with somebody who liked the Manhattans, I'd get them on the phone. And that at one time there was a famous, she's a pretty well known singer named Kelly Coffey. She moved from L.A. to Nashville, and she had a #1 record the first year she was here on RCA. It was called "When You Lie Next to Me." Great record, and probably I don't know sometime in the mid 2000s,
Wow.
but 2005, six. Anyway, she was in my studio, and there was one part on this record we were doing. She couldn't get the harmony right, and I said, "It's like a Everly Brothers kind of harmony." She said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So I said, "Okay, great. Let's call up Phil Everly." And so in LA, and her father from Oklahoma is just there hanging out. And he's like, "You're calling Phil Everly?" He loved the Everly Brothers. So I get Phil Everly up. Luckily, he answered the phone. And I said, "Phil, we got this song." So it's on the speakerphone. So he said, "Play it." So I play it. He goes from the phone. He said, "Tell her to sing this." And he goes, "Doo, doo, doo," like the notes. And she hears it. It doesn't make sense, but it had that Everly sound, kind of like a hillbilly harmony. And her father's like jumping up and down in his seat because he's like, "This is really really cool." And it was just one of those. I said a moment that you just feel like you're part of something special. There was a guy, a singer I knew, came by. He was really depressed, Perry Moore, and he wasn't working. He was selling car wash stuff. And he came by the studio. He sits in the chair, and I was working on something. He said, man, my life is terrible. Nothing's going on good. I can't get any work. I haven't got any money.
Mm.
And I was just there, support. And then the phone rings. So Ollie Woodson, who was at that point one of the singers of the Temptations, he wrote their hit "Treat Her Like a Lady," and so Ollie calls me up and he says, "Ollie, hey Pearlie, we need another singer for the Temptations. You know somebody?" And I said, I look at Perry sitting across from me, slumped over, all depressed,
Mm.
and I'm listening to Ollie. "Do you know a singer?" I said, "Hold on a second." I put the phone down. I said, "Hey Perry, you want to be in the Temptations?" And he's like, cusses me out and tells me, like I'm playing games with him. He said, "Come on, man, don't do that to me. I'm feeling terrible. This is the low point of my life." I said, "No, you want to be in the Temptations?" She's like, "Sure, yeah, I want to be in the Temptations." Like, "Hey, man, you want to be in the Beatles or something?" And I said, "Okay, Ollie, this is Perry. Perry, this is Ollie." And I
Wow.
give him the phone, and Perry got into the Temptations. I said it was like from a Hollywood movie that God used me to do that right there at that moment. And that's a moment I'll never forget, that because it was so perfect that I felt like it was scripted. And so
That's
to
funny.
just be part of it. I came home from riding my bike in LA, and it looks like a homeless guy with a hoodie on is standing in front of my condo. And I come riding up on my bike and I say, "Hey, blah, 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 blah. Get out of here. You can't hang out over here." And then I look at him, and it's Bob Dylan. I
Oh,
said, "Bob?" And he said, "Hey, man, I just been hanging out. I just came by because I need some help with that George Gershwin song. And
wow.
you guys want home?" So he said, I've been walking around the block." I said, "For like an hour." And I had this vision in my head, what's been funny, to see
Phil Everly? No, no, he's dead.
Bob, to see, I can imagine my neighbors looking out their window and saying, "Hey, look, there goes Bob Dylan walking by." And then, "Look, there he goes again." And there he goes again. And just to see Bob Dylan walking around the neighborhood without a bodyguard or something. I'll call back.
I can
So,
imagine it's like, oh yeah, Phil Everly. Hold on, let me just call him. Hello. Oh, it's like, yeah, hey, did you want to play piano for Billy Joel? Did you want to be Liberty DeVito was yeah, you want to replace
that's
me?
how, yeah,
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Hi, Billy. Hi, I have a friend who wants to. Do you imagine just being able to pick up a phone and call a musician and help someone out? That's amazing, my friend.
I've heard those stories. I said when I was working with Dave Mason, I always wanted to work with Stevie Winwood. And this is the year that Traffic, their group together,
Hmm.
got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I was at Dave's house, and the phone rings, and it's Stevie Winwood.
Hmm.
So I'm there sitting there, and I was like, "This is it. Thank you, Jesus. This is my moment, right? Now I'm
Wow.
going to get to meet Stevie Winwood, work with Stevie, because I wanted to produce Traffic, not just Dave." And so the conversation, they're like, "Hello, hello." And they start fighting on the phone. And as the more they're fighting, I can't hear Stevie, but I hear Dave, and they're yelling at each other. And I'm in the other room, tears, because I'm like, "No, don't fight. Be nice to each other."
Uh huh.
Right. And
Wow.
then bam, phone clicks. And I said, "What happened?" Rah, 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 rah. And then at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame awards, they they got up separately. They wouldn't, kind of like what happened with Creedence Clearwater, where they all went up separate, and they got their awards separate like that. So sometimes it doesn't work out the way you planned, but that was said. Those are just those moments that you're part of history, whether it's a positive note or something. Diana Ross came by the studio when I was working with Bob recording,
Wow.
and I was working on some guitar thing with Bob, and the engineer said, "Hey, Diana Ross just called. She said she's on her way over there." And Bob looks at the engineer, looks at me, and he goes, like as if Diana's gonna come to Bob's session, because I guess they had met during We Are the World. And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, yeah." And she's bringing Farrah Fawcett with her, who was like a big TV star back then. And so we didn't think anything about it. We just kept working. And then when I was playing, Diana Ross walks in. And all I thought to myself was, "Don't mess up, because I always wanted to work with Diana. It's like I
Wow.
don't get to run into Diana Ross in the studio all the time. And she stayed all night. She sang. She told stories, and I ended up working with her 5 other different times. I played on her album. I did arrangements for her, but this was the first time, and it was just like one of those moments. Hey, it's Diana Ross. Sometimes people in the studios in the old days when people actually went, I ran into Madonna leaving a session. I was like, oh, hey, what's up? And one time in New York, I'd gone with somebody just to hang out with them at this, I forget this, Hit Factory, I think. But anyway, my oldest son, was up visiting because he used to live with his grandmother at the time. We were on the road a lot. And so he was with me, and Mick Jagger walked in the green room. And I said, "Oh, hey, what's up?" And he's like, "Yeah, hey, what's up? How you doing?" And I said to my son, "Hey, you know who this is?" And he goes, "No," because he's living in D.C. and he's into go-go music,
Everyone
and he
knows
doesn't know.
him.
Not his. My son's in 1982. He's living in D.C. He knows R&B and funk, and that's the music he loves. He's a little kid, 10 years old. He doesn't know about the Rolling Stones. That's when I was 10 years old, and so he says, "Nope." And Mick Jagger laughs, and he said, "My daughter Jade would love this because my daughter Jade's always making fun of me, saying you think everybody knows who you are." And he said, to meet somebody who doesn't even know who I am. And so
That's
I
funny.
said, I wish I had a picture of this. And so the next day I took Roddy to go see the Rolling Stones had a movie out there called Let's Spend the Night Together, a concert movie. And he saw the concert movie. After that, he was like, guess who I met? Da, 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 da. He just couldn't stop talking about it, but he didn't know who he was. Like it could have been, Joe Schmo or something like that. So
That's funny. That's a, you imagine. Like I heard the story about Jacob Dylan was hanging outside a convenience store, and this one woman walked right past him, and he's like, "Whoa,
uh-huh.
whoa!" And she goes in, and then she comes out and said, "Hey, hey, what? Don't you know who I am?" And she goes, "Yeah, you're Jacob Dylan. You're Bob Dylan's son. You from the Wallflowers." And he goes, "Well, don't you want my autograph or anything?" "No, I'm sure that everyone who sees you wants your autograph." But he said, "You're right." So they had a conversation, and then he says, "Okay, well, thank you for talking to me and respecting me as just a regular person. Do you want my autograph?"
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, "No," and then walked away.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
um,
There was there's a singer named Jonathan Richman, and I was doing sound actually at the Bitter Ends Club in New York, and they said Jonathan Richman was coming, the Modern Lovers. Now, the Modern Lovers were very influential. People from the Talking Heads, Jerry Harrison came from the Modern Lovers. Another guy in the Cars came from the Modern Lovers. They had a record called Egyptian Reggae that I think Joan Jett recorded. That they were one of the first Andy Warhol's punk. They were right there in the when punk started. And so Jonathan Richman's coming in, and I said, I don't know who that is. Never heard of him. And then there's a line outside the club goes 2 blocks away to see Jonathan Richman. I was like, I still don't know who this guy is. And not only did I know him, I got into a fight with him because he took my amp that I kept at the club. I used to play there all the time. And he,
wow.
he was playing the amp on stage. And I said, dude, you can't use it. That's my amp. No, no, I like this amp. I'm going to use it. It's like, I don't care what you like. You got to put that amp back. And we're fighting because he's got my amp. And I'm like, you unplug that thing and turn it off, right? So this is how our relationship started. At the end of the night, I ended up sitting in with him. I brought my guitar up and I played with him. Then he hired me. I ended up producing 3 songs on him, and then I went on tour with him for a minute. So that was a interesting start to somebody that I'd never heard of him before. You could have told me he was very well known in the underground, like kind of like an alt indie kind of artist back then. But
It's too
Jonathan Richard, who's that?
Yeah, it's too bad you didn't have the wah wah pedal because complaining about things you go wow wow wow. you know.
Yeah, Jonathan didn't care about celebrity. He would go on tour in Europe and bring. I don't know if you remember a Shure Vocal Master PA, which was the old one. It was like from the '60s or something, and he'd be playing 25,000, 30,000 seat festivals where they had beautiful PA systems, and he'd bring this stupid PA system. He was in a movie called Something About Mary with Cameron Diaz. I think it was the Farrelly brothers, and he was running all the way through the movie. I think it's Ben Stiller, Cameron Diaz, and Matt Dillon, and a big movie. But all through the movie is Jonathan singing and playing all the way through that until they finally somebody shoots him at the end, and it was just this eclectic. Who is that? Why is he there? Kind of thing. But there are people that are really talented, really good, and a lot of indie artists that people don't know about, and then finally they discover them. And it's like, wow, where have they been? Canada's full of great songwriters and
Oh yeah.
artists. New York, John Lennon loved living in New York because nobody bothered him. I saw John and Yoko a block away from where I lived, my apartment on the east side, and it was like they were standing on the corner waiting for the light to change.
Yeah.
And I went up and
Wow.
said, "Hey, what's up?" I just said, "Hey, what's up?" They said, "Hey, what's going on?" That was it. Nobody bothered them. Nobody, I said I'd met Mick Jagger one time before walking down 57th Street, and I passed him and said, "Hey, what's up? What's up?" Hey, you
Wow.
doing? Nobody, people like I said, Israel was like that. I had dinner with Abba Eban, the UN ambassador, and it was like, hello, how are you? No big
Wow.
deal. Nobody fussed over anybody. And New York is a great place to disappear within the city. Nobody
Yeah.
cares that you're famous. Everybody's famous or not famous. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. They say that this singing crooner who looks kind of like Jim Morrison. They're saying, well, Jim Morrison faked his death and he's actually singing homeless guy. And not only that, when they confront his sister, they say, is Jim still alive? She kind of like slams the door in her face. But I wanted to ask you, you
Jim,
mentioned
if
Chicago.
Jim was alive, I wrote songs. That song "Lover's Lullaby" I was telling you about. I co-wrote it with
Hmm.
Ken Hirsch and Phil Cody. Phil Cody is the way I got to work with Neil Sedaka. He introduced me to
Oh,
Neil. And
I like Neil
Phil wrote.
Sedaka.
I did 2 albums with Neil. Phil wrote "Laughter in the Rain" with Neil.
Yeah, Laughter in the Rain, my favorite.
So that is
You wrote
Phil
that with
Cody.
him?
Yeah, me and Phil
Nice.
wrote, and not Laughter in the Rain. Phil wrote Laughter in the Rain with Neil, but
Oh,
Phil wrote the song that I was saying, one of my favorite
oh, okay.
original songs. Phil Cody wrote that, and he told me stories about how one of his songs got recorded by Huey Lewis and the News because they just met somebody in the bathroom,
Mm.
and they just happened to say, "Hey, you got a song?" He said, "Yeah, I have a song," and that's how a song got cut. There's no songwriters have asked me how did I work with like the greatest songwriters in the world, from Jerry Goffin, Carole King. I said Brian Wilson. Every songwriter, Jeff Barry, Ellie Granite, every songwriter you can imagine, I've worked with and been in my studio, from Desmond Child to just all of them. And so I always would ask them, how did they get their songs recorded? What did they do? Burt Bacharach. I mean, just and some of them would tell stories that I don't know. It just somebody happened to hear it, and they just heard it and they liked it. It's never exact. It's never like in the movies where it's like I did this and this happened. It's always kind of like a circuitous path. It's never a straight line.
Yeah.
There's no answer to that.
Well, you were discussing Chicago, and I was going to ask you if you met Terry Kath, but he had passed long before that. So, did you
Mhm.
like working with Peter Cetera? Did you like him?
Peter Cetera was. I worked with them in 1999, 2000. I worked with um, Lee Loughnane after that, before, but
That
as far as
before
the
he left
group,
or after he left Chicago?
he was gone.
Uh,
And so I came in there and I was hired to record their live album, Chicago 26,
oh yeah.
and or 25. And so when I first met with the band to go over plans, what are we going to do? How are we going to record this? So I'm giving all my grandiose, plans for this great album. And I said, oh, we'll get guest artists to come in, and we'll get Vince Gill to come play, and we'll get this group to come sing. And I have this whole thing, and everything is great. Everybody's smiling. We'll record it in Chicago at the Chicago Symphony Hall, where they started. Great. You're a genius, Ted. Da, 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 da. And then I get to the end of my whole list of all these wonderful ideas, and I say, and we'll get Peter Cetera to come back and sing. And then they're all going like this in the back of the room, like, move on, forget it, because they didn't part on good terms. Not only did they part on good terms, when Chicago got inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, um, Danny Serafini, who had left the band years earlier, he showed up, but Peter Cetera wouldn't. He didn't go to the
Yeah.
event. They just people. They get into these fights and they don't want to be
Yeah,
near
the
each other.
Noel and Liam Gallagher's and brothers Oasis, and they
Yeah,
just
Oasis, sure.
like
Yep,
I
same
wouldn't
thing.
like if I was in the band, I wouldn't have any member of my family in the band because you want to keep family out. But there are so many people that have bands with like the Hanson brothers and then Sisters J, which is okay. Um,
They get along great.
yeah,
They really have a special bond that nobody's ever going to be able
that's
to get.
amazing.
Nobody.
Lot of great stories. Yeah, you're the man. I also see that you are known for "I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry." Were you in that movie, or you wrote for it?
I produced two songs. The one we did by the Manhattans, "Shining Star," that last as part of the movie, and I brought Blue Lovin' in from Arizona, and he arranged the background vocals, so it was the same as the Manhattans record.
Wow.
They wanted that, so he came in. But and then I did "Freedom," a George Michael song. I did the arrangement on that, produced that, and then they said, Adam said, "Do you want to be in the movie?" And this was the movie was important because it was about two guys pretending to be gay to keep their health insurance because one of the guy's
Mhm.
wives had died. So Kevin James, Adam Sandler, and Lance Bass, who had just come out as being gay from NSYNC, he came into the studio to sing, and he was very cool. And he because he had just come out, they wanted him to be part of the movie. And so they said, "You want to be in the movie?" And I was like, "I'm not an actor. What am I going to do?" You'll be the band leader. So if you watch Chuck and Larry, you can see me and Lance Bass on stage doing "Shining
Nice,
Star" and "Freedom,"
nice
and I'm
best
up
from
there
NSYNC.
dancing.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it was great because I got to meet what's uh, from NSYNC, right? But Justin Timberlake's wife,
yeah.
Jessica Biel. So she was in the movie, so I got
Jessica
to
Biel.
meet her.
Wow.
And Dan Aykroyd was there, and Ving Rhames. I have a great picture with Ving Rhames, and it was just cool to be part of a film. I played piano for Mariah Carey to sing the national anthem in uh, what was it called? Zohan. Don't be afraid of the Zohan, where Adam is playing an Israeli Mossad
Yeah,
secret agent, something like that. So that was cool, just to be around that. I mean, I haven't I've done music for movies, but to actually be part of the movie is pretty exciting.
that is amazing, my friend. Wow. Yeah, you're so eclectic. You got all these accolades, and
Even I have a guy. My friend was Don LaFontaine. For you talk about radio, LaFontaine was the greatest voiceover guy
yeah,
ever. That
I've heard of them.
in
Yeah,
every movie trailer, he invented the whole movie trailer genre, and that voice was in a world. They even made a Geico commercial showing him doing a mighty wind, and he would raise his voice high for comedy, and he'd be low from the depths of the deepest part of the. I mean, he just had this amazing voice, and he was a good friend, my son's godfather, and he just really taught me a lot.
yeah. Now I'm going with all these other artists that we didn't mention in this podcast going to my head, and one of them that rings, and I'm thinking maybe Ted worked with him, Dennis DeYoung from Styx.
No, Styx is on my list, like for
Oh,
example, Sticks is on my Dennis, but what's his name? The guitar player is a great Tommy Shaw. I
hmm
love Tommy Shaw's a great musician, but Sticks, I'm sailing away.
I love it. Yeah, I
So
love his voice. I'm
yeah,
sailing away. I love the vibrato that Dennis has. And I try to reach out to
yeah,
see, Dennis, could you please be on my podcast? I'd like to talk to you about, Domo Arigato. Like, what's this all about?
sure.
But
Yeah, I didn't dislike Styx records. It's just that they played them so much, and everybody played them, and it was like REO Speedwagon. It's like you couldn't get away from it. So it was like I didn't have to like it because it was always there. Now it's just in the background of old,
yeah,
80s movies and things. Yeah, I mean they're all great musicians. I
yeah.
can't say a word.
And also, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean I I have strong opinions about things. The only thing that I really don't like is when people don't treat other people well. So if I find out that a band or musicians are not nice to their fans, then they go on my list of, I don't want to hear you anymore kind
Yeah,
of
did
thing.
you hear that whole thing about Madonna? She started like 2 hours late, and people were saying, Madonna, you should go in a home because she's getting to the point where, like, really, Madonna, please, there's a nursing home. So they're kind of being mean to her. And then they're talking about Taylor Swift and people spending hundreds of thousands of dollars just to see her, and she's a multi-billionaire now. And
I
so,
love Taylor.
yeah,
We saw the Eras. We couldn't get into the show to go see it live, but we saw the Eras tour, and that was probably one of the best productions I've ever seen in my life. I mean, she's she's in her own zone. I mean, I love her records, Anti-Hero, the old stuff, the new stuff, and she's just great. Songs are great. Shake it up, shake it. I mean, she's like, when you say the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, those artists, and Elton John and Stevie Wonder, the artists that really
mm,
made a difference. Taylor Swift is now in that conversation.
yeah. I
She's
want
the,
to ask you what were your feelings to the tragic feelings, emotions when you heard what happened to John Lennon? What was going through your head?
oh no, I was there. I was driving. We just passed New York City going out to Long Island, and I heard it December 8th, and I just turned around and drove back to the Dakota. And I'd driven by the Dakota. I knew Roberta Flack lived in the building. I knew other people in there. Just turned around, went back, and just drove by, just me and everybody else who heard about it, because it was like, not Elvis Presley was before my generation, and when Elvis died, all the people that grew up with Elvis, it's kind of like your youth died because
Yeah.
Elvis can't die, So then when John Lennon died, that was the Beatles, and that was the first person group that I heard that made me want to do music and love music so much. So John Lennon can't die. I mean, if John Lennon can die, then I can die. It's kind of like a wake up call for my whole generation, the baby boomers. And then other people just go alone. But John was just so the first one from the Beatles. When George died, I'd met George once at the airport, but it wasn't as impactful. John, it would have been like if Paul McCartney had died. Those were the two main ones.
Wow.
But John, that was it means it impacts people, but it also shows that people give artists too much credence. It's kind of like in churches where something happens with the pastor and people lose their faith. And it's like the pastor is a human being like you, only one perfect person ever walked the earth. And so I don't hold anybody to be perfect. But Justin Trudeau can say something I don't like, or he can say something I do like. And Madonna is such an important artist. Her record "Ray of Light" is what I call a perfect record. It's a perfect record, and so those records really made an impact on me because she just always wanted to push the envelope. Michael Jackson, they always pushed the envelope, and they weren't content to be where they were. They just always tried to get better. Like in athletes like Kawhi Leonard or LeBron James or Michael Jordan, they always push the envelope to be better. Pele. I mean, I even worked out with Pele. We lived in the same building back in New Jersey. Pele, the famous football
Yeah.
player. But he was always, we were on a bike together, and I riding the bike, and then I got tired and I left, and I came back a couple hours later, and he was still on the bike. And I was like,
Wow.
"You've been here for the last 3 hours?" And he said, "I got to make my legs stronger,"
Yeah. It
and
was.
just he had that desire just to be better. And so Madonna is in the U2, Bono. They're always trying to do something better. Even Paul McCartney, after doing it all these years, is still trying to do. Burt Bacharach, Burt died last year at 95 years old,
Hmm.
and everything I did with Burt, no matter how much success he had, he always treated every new song like it was the first song he ever wrote. Chicago, I said, when I heard Chicago, when I was in high school, I cut out of school to go see them in New York when they first started. And so years later, for me to be on stage with them working was just so exciting. And they treated every show like it was their first show. They never slouched, or they never, did it like it was rote or just something. They just, they just wouldn't stop, working to be better.
It looks like you're really busy. So, um,
No, this is my. my father or something like that. So
Okay,
I
so
texted, but
let me ask you how. I know that I think it was the sisters Jay or Mother Mary Jackson, whatever, told me that
uh
you worked on the song clearly. I think, but I'd like to know
we did 4 songs.
how you found how
Three.
you how what was your how did you put that together? Because they said that
Uh,
they had a tune, and then you put words or something to it, and then it's sort of like you worked it out. And what's the
Clearly, they had that. Then we changed. I changed the. I have a sound in my head, and then I kind of like morphed the song into that. I did the first one I did was "Open When," which was about open when letters when you're away from your partner. Clearly. But the third one that we did, "Breathe In," that's the one. That's one of my favorites. And that one, we like usually when you start writing a song and producing a song, you do a template of what you want the song to be like. You know, like Celine, I did a song with somebody in the demo. Norman Gimbel, the famous writer, wrote "Killing Me Softly." The demo he gave me to use as a template was sung by Celine before she became famous,
Mm.
which was really cool. So anyway, on "Breathe In," we listened to a group called the Oh Hellos, and it was really cool. And so we took that rhythm, and then that became the basis of the song. So usually lots of songwriters will take something and take the vibe of it or the tempo or the drum beat, just something about it, and then they say, great, that's our starting point. So you're not stealing somebody's song, but you're using the vibe of the record as a starting point to jump off from, and then you work further. There was a there was a songwriter named Larry Brown. He wrote "Tie Yellow Ribbon," "Tie
Yeah,
Your Yellow Ribbon,"
Tony Orlando
and
and
so
Don. Yeah,
yeah, Tony Orlando, one of my clients. Tony's great. He just decided to retire just
yeah.
yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he said that he'd do a whole thing and he'd say, I took my song from Gilbert O'Sullivan, "Alone Again," in a little while from now, and it's the same chords. And then he wrote, "Tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree," the same chords. And then Barry Gibb, "How Deep Is Your Love?" He said he took my chords and he wrote his song, and he would show how all of those songs were the same. And there was a song called "Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself" by a group called Sly and the Family Stone. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like years ago. It was sounded like
Yeah,
Janet Jackson. They said
you were mentioning.
in,
Sorry to interrupt. Sly and the Family Stone. Do you remember? Do you ever? You know that guy Jesse Duplantis? He actually played for Sly and the Family Stone.
I don't know him. Sorry.
Jesse Duplantis. He's like an evangelist, but he played
Okay.
for Sly and the Family Stone. Anyway, sorry to digress. Go
Wow.
ahead.
Yeah, anybody that played with Sly. Sly was great. Sly had such great musicality. He was a DJ from Oakland, and then he got the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing together. But Janet Jackson took that riff and they made it Rhythm Nation. That became that. And so you could take other songs and you could say, well, where did this come from? And where did this thing come from? And, they where they sample things, James, they take these little pieces and they used to hire me to
That
take
sounded like the
riffs.
beginning of Roxanne for a minute.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. So the police, so that, but that great riff that the police had was,
This
but
is
that
awesome.
riff there, they made
Great.
it. Puffy Combs did it, and they made it something else. And so they would hire me when they didn't want to pay licensing fees
Mm.
to take a riff, like you said, "Smoke on the Water" earlier. So that if they didn't want to pay the money for that, so I would make that,
Wow,
and that would be
love it.
something, even
Mhm.
something like an aqualung. I could take that and make that
Just very cool.
and just change it enough where nobody has to pay on it. And so then it's some place to start. It could be anything. I mean, even a song by the Doobie Brothers, which was "Listen to the Music."
Wow, you can play everything, my friend. Wow.
But you could take that and make that. and
That's
take it off the
crazy.
beat. You can play anything, you know. So just turn it around a little bit. So there's nothing original. Everything is from somewhere else, and it's just a matter of how you use it in a creative way. That's all.
Okay.
You know,
All right. Play a little bit of America.
America, the group America.
Yeah.
I don't know. High Venture Highway, but I love their producer George Martin, one of my heroes.
Oh
You know,
man.
but I don't know any America, but I know.
Yeah,
And I love the stuff by
it's amazing. Here's some fun.
and I thought
Eric
Eric,
Clapton.
oh, I thought that was that's what
Amazing.
Tony and Anderson wrote it. I didn't realize it was it's Bach. So I didn't know that. I just
You're
thought
amazing, man. You're
you say
amazing.
Beatles, you say like Chuck Berry. You know, I thought that was the Beatles.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I thought I didn't know until I worked with Chuck Berry, but
Mm.
I thought Beatles wrote that stuff, so that just happened to be the first place I heard it. Same thing with like people. You need to know history, where things came from, and how gospel and country became rock and roll, and how did that that evolution happen. Country, you have to just know all of it just to be a, there's a old saying said, in order to know where you're going, you got to know where you're coming from. And it's kind
Amazing.
of like you said about the Bible. You can't study the New Testament without knowing the Old Testament.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
if you study religion, you'd have to study the Quran. You have to study Hinduism and Buddhism and all of that just
Yeah.
to get you know.
Well, in college, there was I think it was a Baptist minister, but he was a teacher at the college, and we had to take a course called comparative religion, and we had to read
Yep.
the Bhagavad
Yep.
Gita, the Hindu Bible, and we
Yep.
had to write a thesis on it in order to get a mark. And I'm like, really? I have to read the
Yep.
Bhagavad Gita? And then I realized that
Um,
it's good to read these things because then if you need to share the gospel with someone who's of that faith, then it's easier because, oh,
mhm.
you know what, the Bhagavad says this and that. Quran says,
Correct.
yeah.
When you run into things, I had a book that had Jesus Buddha, and it showed things that Jesus said, things that Buddha said, and some of them were so close. I mean, there's only one truth. So, however you get to the truth, you have a TV, you have a signal, whatever station you decide to turn into. But if you believe in the concept of monotheism, one God, then everybody might have a different version of it.
Wow.
But basically, it's just how do you connect with God, whether it's Christianity, whether it's through Mary, whether it's baptism, whether you're Catholic through the Pope. I mean, whatever the ultimate goal is to find truth. And even Jesus said, you only got to do two things, love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and
I love
love your
your
neighbor
neighbor
as
as
yourself.
yourself.
These are two greatest commandments, and that's it. So, whatever religion you choose to follow, whether it's on Sundays, Saturdays, that's up to you personally.
Yeah,
But your
I
faith,
remember Mother Teresa says that if you're Buddha or you're a Muslim or a Hindu, be the best Hindu, be the best Muslim, be the
correct.
best. But in the end, you have to decide. But
Yeah,
my
all of it, mankind, men and women, distort the love part of all the religions. All the religions are based on love, and it gets
yeah,
distorted by organized religion and stuff like that. So that's
well,
when it gets
yeah, I'm so sorry that we couldn't. I could spend 4 hours with you, but I have a meeting at 2, but
okay.
or 2 my time, 1 your time. But I really appreciated getting this interview set up. Oh, beautiful. Learning that you worked with everyone. Amazing. Love this interview. I'm actually going to post this quickly because this was fantastic. This is one of the best
Okay, thanks.
interviews, I think.
I'm
Well,
here for you. You want to continue on talking about anything? I'm here anytime you want.
hey, do you think maybe we can have another interview or just have another discussion about other things?
Sure.
That'd be
Sure. Anytime.
Sounds good.
Anytime.
Because I'm sure there's a few things I've neglected to talk about, like what your thoughts on life after death are. What do you think happens after death? What the Jewish religion believes in that stuff. I like to talk to you about that, but at some other
Sure,
point. But right now, I got a
sure.
meeting at 2 o'clock my time, and I have to go. But really appreciate it, everyone. Ted Perlman's YouTube channel and everything will be linked down below. And it's like I can't believe you actually linked Ringo Starr and John Lennon. You probably met Paul McCartney. You probably worked with George Harrison. This guy worked with everyone except my favorite. I like that Dennis
I
DeYoung.
would Leonard Cohen too. Yeah, I did a great record with Leonard
Yeah,
Cohen, another Canadian artist,
yeah,
great, and it was called Tower of Song. And I did arrangements of his songs for all these different artists, including Peter Gabriel, Bono, Elton John, Celine, and I would take the songs and put them into the arrangements for each one of those artists. So that was pretty cool. Tower of Song we did with Aaron Neville, I'm Your Man with Elton John,
yeah.
and just really it was really interesting to take, the Leonard songs, which are pretty amazing. Some of them are really long, and to put them in a different kind of style. But I said, Dolly Parton hired me to take her songs. I did Jolene for Tina Turner. And so, as an arranger, producer, if it's a good song, I can turn it into anything. So, this last story, I know you got to go, but when we played at the Palladium in London, when I was with Harry, we were there for a week, and ABC did a special America Salutes the Queen. Now, this is 1977, so this is before Princess Diana, but the Queen of England was there, and Prince Philip, and Charles, and Anne, and her husband, time Mark. So, anyway, at soundcheck, I mean, Harry's on the show, and Rudolph Nureyev, and Bob Hope, Rich Little, the Muppets, everybody's there. So at soundcheck, I went up. The Queen has her own private booth. It's just like a special booth where she sits. It's like the first balcony, and then she has her own bathroom in there. So I just went up to look at the booth, and nobody was around. And I said, "The Queen's toilet's there." I said, "Great." So I wanted, people always say rich people always, they use the same toilet as everybody else. So I went in there and I used the Queen's toilet. I didn't do anything crazy, but I just wanted to come back, tell my friends. I said, my butt and the Queen's butt are the same size. She sits on the toilet, we sit on the toilet, and she may be the Queen of England, rest her soul in peace, but she's no different than all of us. And it was just a great leveling thing that all these people that people hold up to the light, even Jesus, had to sit on the toilet and had to go do the same
Exactly.
thing.
You and I
So
think the same way because he's also was not only just God in the flesh, but he was man as well. I have a Queen
yeah,
story, but my story is about a friend of mine. He was a photographer, and he was
mm-hmm.
in England around Buckingham Palace, is taking photos of all around like Hyde Park and all that. And suddenly Prince Philip comes walking towards him on the boardwalk, and he goes, "Hi." He goes, "Hello, how are you?"
Yeah, yeah,
And instantly, when they noticed that his security and everything, when they noticed that Prince Philip was on his own, and they saw him with a stranger with a like a he might have been a paparazzi, but he wasn't.
mm-hmm.
Security just ran to him, and they blocked his way, and they said, "This is Prince
Sure.
Philip. This is like God Himself, sort of." And he was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I was just taking photos here. I wasn't here to shoot Prince Philip. I didn't know that he was here. Sorry, and a big ruckus because of him. So that's my Queen story, but that was interesting.
Yeah, she was at the end of the show. I said I got to go. She didn't come to talk to me, just the artist. But I stood right as she walked past to get on the stage. So I put myself right in the front. So me, Shirley MacLaine, Peter Ustinov,
Surely
and then
McLean.
all the artists are here. So as she comes up, she you notice that Prince Philip is not with her, and he's all the way at the back of the line, and he's talking to this beautiful young somebody, and he's up in her face, and he's got his Mac Daddy thing on.
This
He's
is
like,
gold.
"Hello, he's a real good looking guy." He's like, "I'm the Prince of England or something." And so Queen Elizabeth, she turns around and she looks back and she goes, we seem to have lost Philip. And just like, and it
Yeah.
was great. He went back there, and I'm sure when I watched the Crown series on TV, that's the way it seems like. He was
Yeah.
distracted sometimes, and I guess
Yeah.
she was used to it. So I saw it in person when she said that we seem to have lost Philip, and he was there,
Yeah, I
and
remember
I
that.
said,
I remember the scene from
I
Helen Mirren, who made it. Remember the movie The Queen, where Helen Mirren played the Queen.
right,
The
correct.
scene where she's driving in the forest and her car breaks down, and a guy comes and helps her and said, "Oh, could you
Mm-hmm.
help me with my car?" And I'm just thinking, my God, that's the Queen of England, you know? And you imagine?
Yep,
That's kind of
yep,
funny. When it's like, you're supposed to be the Queen of England. You're supposed to be sitting on a throne. I know, but I like to drive my car around by yourself.
yep,
Yes, I'm just a
yep,
woman, woman of God.
yep,
That's how she was, Amazing.
yep.
Okay, my
And that's
friend,
the way it should be.
this is fantastic.
That's
This
the way
is
it
gold.
should
I'm
be.
definitely going to include these Queen stories. Definitely.
Okay,
Thank you, Ted. I really appreciate this. And I want to talk again and spend more time because
okay,
you're very interesting. This is awesome. I really appreciate
okay.
that.
That's great.
Thank
Well,
you,
God
man.
bless you, and
God bless you.
I feel the trembling tingle of a sleepless night creep through my fingers, and the moon is bright. Beams of blue come flickering through my window pane like gypsy moths that dance around a candle flame. And I wonder if you know that I never understood that although you said you'd go, until you did, I never thought you would. Moonlight used to bathe the contours of your face, while chestnut hair fell all around the pillowcase. The fragrance of your body rests beneath my head, a sympathy bouquet left with a love that's dead. And I wonder if you know that I never understood that although you said you'd go, until you did, I never thought you